The elementary school in downtown New York was buzzing with excitement. The students had no idea that today would be different today. The former First Lady of the United States was visiting. Melania Trump had always believed in the power of education and had decided to make a surprise visit, eager to speak with young minds about hard work, perseverance, and the future. But one person wasn't excited: Ms. Jessica Thornton, the school's most outspoken progressive teacher. As Melania stepped into the classroom, the students gasped. Their little faces lit up with curiosity and excitement. Some whispered to each other, nudging their friends. But Jessica Thornton? She stood with her arms crossed, her lips pressed into a thin line. Melania smiled warmly. "Good morning, children," she said in her signature composed tone. The kids greeted her back enthusiastically, but before Melania could continue, Miss Thornton's voice sliced through the moment. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Trump," she said, her tone laced with forced politeness, "but we don't really promote outdated traditional values in this classroom." The room fell silent. The students, who had been eager to hear from Melania, now glanced between the two women. Melania, unshaken, turned to face the teacher. "Outdated?" she repeated calmly. Jessica folded her arms tighter. "Yes," she said with a smug smile, "we encourage progress here. We teach our children to question authority, to challenge old-fashioned ideas of patriotism and family structures." Melania's gaze didn't waver. She had faced the world's toughest critics. One defiant teacher wasn't going to shake her. She simply smiled and responded, "Well, Miss Thornton, then I suppose today will be a very educational experience for you too." The students gasped. Some giggled. Even a few of the teachers standing in the hallway raised their eyebrows. But Miss Thornton's smile vanished. She was about to learn that Melania Trump didn't back down. Miss Thornton's forced smile faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. She wasn't about to let Melania Trump challenge her authority in her own classroom. "Oh, I'm always open to learning," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Which is why we teach our students critical thinking, not just blind patriotism." Melania nodded slightly, folding her hands in front of her. "Critical thinking is important," she agreed, her voice unwavering. "But true critical thinking requires hearing both sides, doesn't it?" Jessica's lips parted, but before she could respond, a student raised her hand. "Mrs. Trump, what do you think is the most important lesson for kids like us?" Melania turned to the girl, smiling gently. "That's a wonderful question. I believe that respect, hard work, and love for your country are important values." Ms. Thornton scoffed. "And what about inclusivity?" she challenged. Melania's eyes met hers directly. "Respect means treating everyone with kindness, even those who disagree with you. But inclusivity doesn't mean erasing values that have shaped this country." Jessica leaned against her desk, smirking. "Right, because your values are the only ones that matter?" Melania tilted her head. "Are you saying that love for one's country is wrong?" The class fell dead silent. Even the teachers in the hallway stopped whispering. Jessica let out a dry laugh. "I'm saying that America needs to move forward. Patriotism and traditional values have been used to exclude people for too long. We should be teaching these kids to challenge the system, not blindly follow it." Melania took a step closer. "Challenging the system is important. But tell me, Miss Thornton, if these children don't learn the values that built this country, what exactly will they be standing on when they try to change it?" Jessica opened her mouth, then hesitated. She had no answer. The students looked between their teacher and the former First Lady, waiting to see what would happen next. And that's when Jessica Thornton decided to take this battle to the next level. Ms. Thornton's hesitation lasted only a second before she doubled down. "You're talking about values, Mrs. Trump," she said, her voice sharper now. "But let's be real, those so-called American values are just a way to keep certain people in power. They don't include everyone." The classroom felt heavier now. Some students looked nervous, others fascinated by the growing tension between their teacher and the former First Lady. Melania didn't flinch. She had heard these arguments before. Respect, responsibility, family, and hard work, she said slowly, are not exclusive to any group. They are for everyone. Jessica scoffed, shaking her head. That's easy for someone like you to say. You're rich, privileged, and married to a powerful man. You don't know what it's like for people who struggle in this country. The words hung in the air. A few teachers outside the door exchanged glances. Melania let a pause stretch before speaking again. I came to this country with nothing, she said. Her voice was calm, but firm. I learned the language, worked hard, and built my life here. I know exactly what struggle means. A few students whispered among themselves. Some of them had heard about Melania's background, but hearing her say it herself made it real. Jessica, however, wasn't backing down. She needed to regain control. That's different, she said quickly. You had opportunity. Not everyone does. And maybe, instead of talking about hard work, you should talk about what really matters: equity, systemic oppression, and the need to dismantle outdated power structures. Melania raised an eyebrow. She could see exactly where this was going. So you think children should be taught to hate the country they live in? Jessica smirked. Now she had her chance to turn the tables. I think they should be taught the truth. She turned to the class. Kids, let me ask you something. Do you think America has always been fair to everyone? A few students shook their heads. Others looked unsure. Jessica smiled, then turned back to Melania. See, even they understand. Maybe it's time you did too. Melania exhaled slowly. She knew she had to shut this down fast. For the first time, Melania Trump's expression hardened. She had been patient, composed, but now, Jessica Thornton had crossed a line. She took a slow step forward, her piercing gaze locked on the teacher. The classroom was dead silent. Let me ask you something, Miss Thornton, Melania said, her voice as smooth as steel. If America is so broken, why do so many people fight to come here? Jessica blinked. She hadn't expected that. Melania continued, you teach these children that America is oppressive, that it's unfair, that it's built on hate. But I look at them, she gestured to the students, and I see the next generation, a generation that deserves to be proud of where they come from. Jessica forced a laugh. Proud? Proud of what, exactly? Racism? Inequality? The past mistakes of this country? Melania didn't blink. No, proud of what this country has overcome. A murmur spread through the room. Jessica's confidence faltered. Melania took another step forward. You tell these children to focus on everything wrong with America. But have you ever taught them to look at what's right? Jessica clenched her jaw. They need to know the truth. Melania nodded. I agree. But the truth isn't just about what America did wrong. It's also about what America got right. Jessica's smirk was gone. She was losing this debate. And then Melania delivered the final blow. You tell them they are victims. Melania's voice was sharp now. I tell them they are capable of achieving anything. The class stared at Melania in awe. Even some of the teachers standing in the doorway seemed frozen. Jessica's fists clenched at her sides. She was running out of arguments. She had to do something fast. And so, she made a choice that would change everything. She turned to the students. You know what? Let's ask them, she said, forcing a smile. Kids, who do you think is right? The students looked around at each other. No one answered. Jessica's face flushed. This wasn't going the way she had planned, and Melania knew it. She had her exactly where she wanted her. Jessica Thornton's fake smile was cracking. She had tried to turn the class against Melania, but instead, silence filled the room. The students, once caught up in her words, now looked. Uncertain ... And that uncertainty? It was dangerous for her. A boy in the back of the room hesitated, then slowly raised his hand. My grandpa says he came to America because it gave him a chance, he said quietly. He says it's the best place in the world. Jessica's face tightened. But then, another hand shot up. My mom says she worked hard to get a good job, a girl said. She says you can do anything if you don't give up. Jessica's eyes widened. This wasn't supposed to happen. More hands went up. My dad says America isn't perfect, but it's better than anywhere else. My uncle fought in the military. He says we should be proud. My grandma says people used to dream about coming here. The murmurs grew louder. The classroom, once firmly in Jessica's grasp, was slipping away. Jessica threw up her hands. Okay, I get it, she snapped. But you kids don't understand. This country has never been fair to everyone. It was built on oppression. We should be focusing on how to fix it, not glorify it. Melania, who had watched calmly as the class turned against their teacher, finally spoke. Miss Thornton, she said smoothly, you say we should focus on fixing the country. But how do you fix something if you don't believe in it? Jessica froze. Melania stepped forward, her voice steady and powerful. These children deserve to be taught the whole truth. Not just the bad parts, not just what fits your agenda. Jessica's face turned red. She could feel the control slipping away. She had one last move left. And so, she turned to Melania Trump herself and made it personal. Jessica Thornton's face was burning red. She had lost control of the classroom, and the worst part? Melania Trump hadn't even raised her voice. So now she had only one option left. She turned directly to Melania, eyes narrowing. You know what, Mrs. Trump? She said, her voice dripping with venom. I'm not surprised you're defending all of this. You're just another privileged woman who got where she is because of a man. Gasps filled the classroom. Some of the students covered their mouths. The teachers standing in the doorway exchanged stunned glances. But Melania, she didn't flinch. She stared Jessica down, completely unshaken. Jessica smirked, thinking she had finally landed a blow. Let's be honest, Mrs. Trump. If you weren't married to Donald Trump, no one would care what you had to say. Silence. Then, Melania took a step forward. She looked Jessica directly in the eye and spoke in a voice so calm, so cold, that it sent chills through the room. I built my life with my own two hands, she said. I worked. I learned. I succeeded. And I did it in a country that gave me that chance. Jessica opened her mouth, but Melania didn't let her speak. Let me ask you something, Miss Thornton, she continued. If America is so unfair, why are you someone who insults this country still choosing to live and work here? Jessica froze. Melania's gaze hardened. Or perhaps, she said, tilting her head, you simply enjoy the privileges of a country you claim to despise? Boom! The students stared wide-eyed. A few of them nodded slowly. Jessica was speechless. Her hands curled into fists, her face twisted in frustration. She wanted to fight back, but she had nothing left. And then, it got even worse for her, because just then, the principal walked in. The sound of heels clicking against the tile floor echoed through the now silent classroom. All eyes turned to the doorway where Principal Margaret Collins stood with her arms crossed. A tall, no-nonsense woman in her mid-50s. She had watched the last few minutes unfold, and from the look on her face, she was not happy. Miss Thornton, she said, her voice calm but firm. A word, please. Jessica's face went pale. Principal Collins, she stammered. I was just... The principal held up a hand. Not here. My office, now. Jessica glanced at the students, then at Melania. For the first time, she looked nervous. The class watched in stunned silence as their teacher, the woman who had just been shouting about progress and systemic oppression, was now the one being called out. Jessica's jaw clenched. She grabbed her notebook, lifted her chin, and stormed toward the door. But before she could leave, Melania spoke one last time. Miss Thornton, she said, her voice smooth, unwavering. Jessica froze. Melania met her gaze. I hope you listen to your own advice. Jessica narrowed her eyes. What advice? She snapped. Melania gave the slightest smile. To always question authority. A few students gasped. Some of the teachers in the hallway chuckled quietly. Jessica looked like she was about to explode. Without another word, she stormed out of the classroom, her face bright red. The door slammed behind her. The students sat stunned, their heads whipping back toward Melania. Then, slowly, a single student started clapping, then another, and another, until the entire classroom erupted into applause. Melania had won, but it wasn't over just yet. Because now, Principal Collins turned to Melania. "Mrs. Trump," she said, "would you mind staying a little longer? I think these kids would love to hear more about what you have to say." Melania smiled. And as she turned to face the eager students, she knew this was the real lesson they needed today. Melania Trump turned back to the students, her expression warm but resolute. The classroom was still buzzing from what had just happened. Miss Thornton, the teacher who had tried to control the conversation, had been completely dismantled. The students, once unsure, were now fully engaged. A girl in the front row timidly raised her hand. "Mrs. Trump," she asked, "do you really believe America is a great country?" Melania smiled, her gaze scanning the eager young faces in front of her. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with certainty. "Not because it is perfect, but because it gives people like me, like you, the chance to become better. To work hard, to succeed, to change things." The classroom fell silent. Then, one by one, students started nodding. Even some of the teachers in the back of the room, who had been quietly observing, looked deep in thought. But just as the moment settled, the door suddenly burst open. Ms. Thornton stormed back inside, her face twisted with frustration. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're brainwashing these kids. This is my classroom." Principal Collins, who had remained calm through everything, finally lost her patience. "Not anymore, Miss Thornton," she said. "Pack your things. You're done here." The classroom gasped, ... Ms. Thornton's face turned ghostly white. "You can't be serious." Collins folded her arms. "You're entitled to your opinions, but not to indoctrinate children with them." Jessica's eyes darted to the students, the very students who had once hung on her every word. But now, they weren't on her side anymore. She had lost. Without another word, she grabbed her things and stormed out of the room for the last time. A few students cheered. And then, one of them did something unexpected. He stood up, placed his hand over his heart, and began reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. More students rose to their feet. One by one, they joined in. Melania watched, moved by the sight before her. This wasn't just a classroom anymore. It was a symbol of what America could still be. Principal Collins smiled. "Mrs. Trump, would you do us the honor of leading them?" Melania placed her hand over her heart. And as she spoke, the classroom echoed her words louder than ever before. This was more than just a debate. It was a battle of ideas, a fight for the minds of the next generation. Melania Trump stood her ground, and in the end, the truth won. But this is just one classroom. This is happening everywhere. Across America, students are being told that their country is broken, that their values are outdated, that patriotism is a thing of the past. It's up to us to push back. Do you think Melania handled this the right way? Or do you believe the teacher had a point? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And listen, if you believe in stories like this, if you think it's time to stand up for traditional values, then smash that like button. It tells YouTube this content matters. Subscribe right now for more eye-opening stories. And don't forget, turn on notifications so you never miss the next battle in the fight for truth.